Leadership is no longer about the title you carry, but the energy you radiate. The old world was built on hierarchies. The new world is built on consciousness. Fear can control a moment, but only vision can transform a future. The future of leadership is no longer defined by the rigid structures of hierarchy or the outdated belief that control equals effectiveness. For decades, organizations have thrived, or at least functioned, through the enforcement of authority, command, and order. But what we are witnessing now is a profound shift, not just in how organizations operate, but in how human beings are waking up to their deeper capacities. Leadership is evolving from a mechanical system of control to a living system of consciousness. This transition is not simply about improving productivity or efficiency. It is about expanding awareness, tapping into the innate intelligence of people, and unleashing the boundless creative potential that has been suppressed by fear-driven control. When leaders operate from control, they rely on rules, structures, and authority to ensure that people follow. This creates compliance, but compliance is not the same as commitment. Compliance may keep things moving, but it cannot generate innovation or inspire transformation. Conscious leadership, on the other hand, moves beyond the need to control and instead awakens individuals and teams to their own awareness. It encourages them to step into higher levels of responsibility, not because they must, but because they are inspired to. This is the shift from managing behavior to expanding consciousness. Conscious leadership begins with the recognition that every individual is not just a worker or a function within a system, but a multidimensional being with untapped capacities. Science now reveals that human beings are not limited to the boundaries of their roles or their past experiences. The brain has the capacity to rewire itself, to break free of conditioned patterns, and to create entirely new realities. Leaders who understand this no longer rely on coercion to produce results. They cultivate environments where individuals are free to imagine, free to innovate, and free to contribute from a space of authenticity. By doing so, they do not manage people's behavior, but instead awaken their creativity, resilience, and intrinsic motivation. In the old paradigm of control, leadership was a top-down model where power was concentrated in a few individuals and decisions trickled down to those expected to follow. This system was efficient in a time when conformity and stability were valued above all else. But in a rapidly changing world where innovation, adaptability, and creativity determine survival, this model is becoming obsolete. Conscious leadership does not operate through top-down authority. It creates a field of shared awareness where leadership is distributed. In this field, ideas flow from all directions, and solutions emerge not from a single mind, but from the collective intelligence of the whole. The movement from control to consciousness is also a shift from fear to trust. Control is rooted in the belief that people will not perform unless they are closely monitored or managed. It assumes limitation rather than potential. Conscious leadership recognizes that people rise to the level of expectation placed upon them. When you lead from trust, you expand the space in which others can show up fully. Trust does not mean the absence of accountability. It means accountability is born from self-leadership, where individuals are motivated by alignment with vision and purpose rather than fear of punishment. This evolution in leadership requires a new inner state from those who lead. Leaders cannot simply apply techniques or strategies to appear conscious while still carrying the energy of control. They must themselves enter into a new state of being, shifting from survival-based thinking to creative awareness. When a leader operates in a coherent state, aligned in thought, feeling, and intention, they radiate a presence that influences the entire field around them. Others, consciously or unconsciously, resonate with that state of coherence. The leader becomes less a controller of people and more a catalyst of transformation. Control fragments energy, it divides, it restricts, and it suppresses. Consciousness unifies energy, it connects, it liberates, and it expands. When leaders cling to control, they perpetuate environments where fear, stress, and resistance dominate. These states limit brain and body coherence, narrowing focus and suppressing creative thought. But when leaders create from consciousness, they inspire environments where safety, openness, and curiosity flourish. Neuroscience tells us that in states of trust and inspiration, the brain enters higher frequencies, producing greater creativity, problem solving, and collaboration. This is the future of leadership, not managing through pressure, but elevating through awareness. Conscious leadership also means that leaders are no longer defined by what they enforce, but by what they embody. A leader who embodies presence, clarity, and compassion influences more deeply than one who imposes rules and demands compliance. People do not follow consciousness because they are forced to. They follow because it awakens something within themselves. They feel seen, valued, and empowered. They begin to experience their own growth, not as an obligation, but as a choice. This inner alignment then becomes the true fuel for organizational transformation. The journey from control to consciousness is not just an external evolution of leadership models, it is an internal transformation of human awareness. Leaders must first confront the ways in which they themselves operate from fear, insecurity, or the need for dominance. Only then can they truly step into the space of consciousness where leadership becomes less about power and more about service. This shift is not passive. It is the most active form of leadership, requiring courage to let go of control, humility to embrace the collective, and vision to guide from a higher level of awareness. This is why the future of leadership is no longer about creating order through command, but about awakening potential through consciousness. It is about recognizing that organizations are not machines, but living systems of human beings whose awareness, energy, and creativity are the true resources of growth and transformation. It is about understanding that the deepest influence a leader can have is not through control, but through consciousness. The future of leadership is being redefined not by titles, positions, or the weight of authority, but by the quality of energy a leader carries and transmits. For centuries, authority has been the main foundation of leadership, a structure that demanded respect and compliance simply because of rank. People were conditioned to respond to symbols of authority such as uniforms, offices, or titles, often without questioning whether that authority was inspiring, uplifting, or aligned with their own higher potential. But as human awareness evolves, there is a growing recognition that real influence does not come from authority alone. It comes from the energetic presence a leader radiates. Energy is the unseen force that either creates coherence or chaos, inspiration or resistance, unity or division. Authority can compel action, but it cannot compel authentic engagement. Energy, however, is contagious. When a leader walks into a room with clarity, vision, and coherence, the entire environment changes. People sense it immediately, not through logic, but through resonance. The nervous system of every individual is wired to pick up signals of safety, trust, and inspiration. Leadership in its highest form is not about commanding from above, but about embodying an energy that others naturally align with because it awakens their own higher states of being. To understand why energy is more powerful than authority, we must consider the science of coherence. When a leader is fragmented, thinking one thing, feeling another, and projecting yet another, the people around them sense the incongruence. They may still comply with orders due to authority, but the atmosphere is filled with mistrust and subtle resistance. On the other hand, when a leader is coherent, when their thoughts, feelings, and intentions are aligned, their energy creates a field of order that others naturally entrain to. This coherence is not theoretical, it has measurable effects on brain and heart activity, and it directly impacts the creativity and emotional state of those within the leader's sphere. The authority-based model of leadership is transactional. It says, "Do this because I have the right to demand it," but the energy-based model of leadership is transformational. It says, "Step into this vision with me because together we can create something extraordinary." Authority may ensure obedience, but energy inspires evolution. People are no longer satisfied with following rules without meaning. They crave environments where their own energy can expand. Leaders of the future are those who understand this and deliberately cultivate their own inner states to influence others not through force, but through resonance. Consider the difference between a leader who rules through fear and one who leads through inspiration. The authority-driven leader may get quick results because fear triggers urgency and compliance, but the cost is high. Stress, burnout, and disengagement spread throughout the system. Creativity shuts down as the brain in a fear state defaults to survival patterns. Now imagine a leader whose energy radiates trust, vision, and confidence. Instead of shutting down, people open up. Their thinking expands, their collaboration deepens, and their willingness to innovate grows. This is not because they were ordered to do so, but because they were energetically lifted into a state where higher potential feels possible and safe. The shift from authority to energy also changes how leadership is perceived. Authority is external. It depends on the role granted by an organization or system. Energy is internal. It is cultivated through self-awareness, self-regulation, and conscious alignment. This means that leadership is no longer limited to those with titles. Anyone who learns to master their state of being, anyone who chooses to radiate coherence and vision, becomes a leader regardless of position. In this way, leadership is democratized. It spreads across networks, where the energy of one inspired individual can ignite entire teams and movements. This understanding requires leaders to take responsibility for the energy they bring into every interaction. No longer can they hide behind authority as a shield. The way they show up energetically, whether they are reactive, scattered, fearful, or aligned, focused, and expansive, shapes the experience of everyone they touch. In this sense, leadership is less about what a person says and more about the state of consciousness from which they say it. Words without aligned energy fall flat, but words backed by coherent energy have the power to inspire action, trust, and transformation. Energy over authority also reshapes organizational culture. In authority-driven systems, hierarchy creates distance. People at lower levels feel disconnected from decision-making and often undervalued, while those at higher levels are burdened with control and responsibility. But in energy-driven leadership, connection replaces distance. Leaders focus on creating energetic coherence across the organization, ensuring that the collective field is one of trust, innovation, and shared purpose. When this happens, authority becomes secondary. Decisions flow more naturally, collaboration deepens, and the collective intelligence of the organization emerges as its true source of power. For leaders to embody energy over authority, they must first practice self-leadership. Energy cannot be faked. If a leader is overwhelmed by stress, fear, or self-doubt, their energy will reveal it despite their title. But when leaders learn to regulate their emotions, shift from survival states to creative states, and hold a vision greater than their current reality, they generate an energy that uplifts everyone around them. This requires an inner practice, moments of reflection, meditation, and intention setting that align their inner world with the reality they wish to create. The more consistently they do this, the more their energy becomes a stabilizing and inspiring force for others. Authority can disappear with the loss of a position or title, but energy endures. It is what people remember long after words fade. They may forget what a leader instructed them to do, but they never forget how a leader's energy made them feel, whether diminished or expanded, restricted or liberated. The future belongs to leaders who recognize this truth and who choose to cultivate energy that elevates, inspires, and unites rather than authority that controls, restricts, and divides. The future of leadership is unfolding in a way that no longer values domination, control, or competition as its highest measures of success. What is now becoming evident is that the true wealth of any organization, community, or collective lies not in the resources it owns or the power it exerts, but in its capacity to collaborate. Collaboration is becoming the new currency, and its value exceeds that of hierarchy or rigid authority because it taps into something far more expansive: the collective intelligence and creativity of people working in harmony. In a world that is more interconnected than ever before, where information moves at the speed of thought and challenges grow increasingly complex, no single leader, no matter how skilled or intelligent, can hold all the answers. The future belongs to those who know how to activate the genius of the group. Collaboration as the new currency begins with a shift in perspective about human potential. The old paradigm of leadership assumed that knowledge flowed from the top down, that leaders were the gatekeepers of wisdom, and that others were meant to follow instructions. This model created silos, competition, and often a culture of secrecy where individuals protected their ideas rather than shared them. But the emerging model of collaboration recognizes that every individual holds a unique piece of the puzzle, a perspective or insight that, when combined with others, forms a larger picture that no one could have seen alone. It is through the merging of these diverse perspectives that innovation is born. In the past, leadership often rewarded individual achievement over collective growth. Titles, promotions, and recognition were given to those who stood out, often at the expense of others. But collaboration as the new currency values contribution to the whole. It measures success not by how much one person can achieve in isolation, but by how much the group can achieve together. This does not diminish individual excellence. Rather, it amplifies it, because when individuals collaborate, their skills and talents are magnified in the context of collective purpose. A person's true brilliance emerges not when they are competing against others, but when they are co-creating with them. Collaboration also requires a redefinition of power. In hierarchical systems, power is centralized. In collaborative systems, power is distributed. This distribution of power does not create chaos. Instead, it creates resilience. When decision-making and creativity are spread throughout the network, the system becomes adaptive, flexible, and able to respond quickly to change. This is why collaboration is becoming essential in the face of global challenges, technological disruptions, and the need for rapid innovation. It allows organizations and communities to harness the full potential of their members rather than relying on a few voices at the top. The neuroscience of collaboration further validates why it is the new currency. When people work together in environments of trust and openness, their brains release oxytocin, a neurochemical that enhances bonding, empathy, and cooperation. This creates a physiological state that allows for greater creativity and problem solving. Conversely, when people operate in environments of competition and fear, Stress hormones dominate, narrowing focus and limiting higher cognitive functions. In other words, collaboration not only feels better, it also creates the biological conditions necessary for peak performance and innovation. For leaders, embracing collaboration as the new currency means learning how to cultivate environments where people feel safe to share ideas, challenge assumptions, and contribute without fear of judgment. It requires a shift from asking, "How can I control outcomes?" to asking, "How can I unlock collective potential?" The leader's role is no longer to be the sole decision maker, but to be the facilitator of dialogue, the weaver of connections, and the one who creates the conditions where collaboration naturally thrives. This is a profound evolution of leadership identity, from commander to catalyst, from authority to architect of possibility. Collaboration as currency also transforms the way organizations view success. In authority-driven systems, success is often measured by short-term outcomes, quarterly results, individual performance metrics, or immediate gains. In collaboration-driven systems, success is measured by the long-term vitality of the collective, the resilience of relationships, the adaptability of the culture, and the capacity of the group to innovate continuously. While authority-based systems may achieve short bursts of efficiency, collaborative systems create sustainable growth because they are constantly renewing themselves through the creativity of many. One of the most powerful aspects of collaboration is that it dismantles the illusion of separation. In hierarchies, individuals often feel isolated, competing for recognition or fearful of losing their place. Collaboration erases these boundaries and reminds people that they are part of something greater. When individuals shift from me to we, they experience a deeper sense of purpose, belonging, and contribution. They realize that their value is not diminished by the success of others, but amplified by it. This creates a field of collective alignment where synergy becomes the natural state of operation. The future of leadership demands a new kind of skill set, one that prioritizes empathy, emotional intelligence, and the ability to listen deeply. Collaboration cannot be forced, it must be cultivated. Leaders must learn to step back from the need to dominate conversations and instead hold space for the voices of others. They must learn to see beyond their own perspectives and recognize the brilliance emerging from diversity. This requires humility, patience, and trust, qualities that are often undervalued in authority-driven models but essential in collaboration-driven systems. Collaboration as the new currency also transcends organizational boundary. In a world connected through technology and global networks, collaboration is no longer limited to teams within a single company. Partnerships across industries, cultures, and nations are becoming essential to address the challenges of the future. From climate change to technological ethics, from social innovation to global health, no single entity can solve these problems alone. Collaboration is the only currency valuable enough to invest in solutions at this scale. Ultimately, collaboration is the language of evolution. Life itself thrives on collaboration. Ecosystems are sustained not by individual species competing for dominance, but by complex networks of interdependence where each part contributes to the whole. Human leadership is finally catching up with this universal truth. When leaders recognize collaboration as the new currency, they align with the natural order of life itself, where synergy, cooperation, and shared purpose generate outcomes far greater than the sum of individual parts. The evolution of leadership is moving away from the outdated reliance on fear as a mechanism of influence and into a new paradigm where vision becomes the true guiding force. For centuries, leadership was often equated with control, and control was maintained through fear. Fear of failure, fear of punishment, fear of exclusion. Fear Fear-based leadership was effective in generating obedience and urgency, but it came at a cost. It suppressed creativity, stifled authenticity, and created environments where survival instincts dominated over innovation. The future of leadership is breaking away from this cycle and recognizing that the deepest form of influence comes not from fear, but from vision. Vision is expansive, it is magnetic, and it invites people into a reality greater than the one they currently know. Fear operates by contracting awareness. When people are afraid, their attention narrows, their nervous system activates survival responses, and their ability to think creatively diminishes. Leaders who rely on fear may get compliance, but they will never unlock the higher capacities of their team. Vision, on the other hand, expands awareness. When leaders articulate a compelling vision of the future, one that inspires, uplifts, and resonates with possibility, they open people to higher levels of brain function, emotional coherence, and imaginative thinking. Vision liberates energy, fear suppresses it. The shift from fear to vision is not just a change in leadership style, it is a transformation in consciousness. Fear-based leadership is rooted in the belief that people need to be controlled, that without pressure they will not perform. Visionary leadership operates from the belief that people are inherently creative, resourceful, and capable of extraordinary growth when they feel connected to a purpose greater than themselves. It is a shift from mistrust to trust, from scarcity to abundance, from limitation to possibility. When a leader chooses to lead with vision, they become a source of inspiration rather than intimidation. Inspiration does not push people into action, it pulls them toward it. People are not driven by fear of what they might lose, but by the excitement of what they might create. This distinction is critical because motivation born of fear burns quickly and often leads to exhaustion, while motivation born of vision renews itself continuously. Vision taps into intrinsic energy, a deeper well of motivation that sustains growth over the long term. Visionary leadership also reshapes the emotional climate of an organization. Fear breeds competition, secrecy, and defensiveness. People become more concerned with protecting themselves than contributing openly. But when vision is the guiding force, it creates a culture of openness, trust, and collaboration. Individuals feel safe to share ideas, to take risks, and to challenge the status quo because they are aligned with something larger than their own self-interest. The shared vision becomes a magnetic field that unites diverse perspectives into a coherent whole. The neuroscience of leadership reinforces why vision is more powerful than fear. In states of fear, the amygdala is activated and the brain's resources are directed toward immediate survival. Higher functions such as creativity, problem solving, and empathy are diminished. But when people are connected to a vision that excites them, the brain releases dopamine and other neurochemicals associated with reward and motivation. This not only enhances focus and energy, but also creates a state of coherence between the heart and brain. In this state, people are capable of greater innovation, deeper connection, and sustained performance. Visionary leadership is not about painting vague or abstract ideas of the future. It is about embodying the future in the present moment. Leaders who lead with vision do not simply describe what could be. They radiate the energy of that possibility so powerfully that others feel it as real, here and now. They become living examples of the future they are inviting others into. This embodiment is what makes vision contagious. People are not inspired by words alone. They are inspired by the energy behind the words, the authenticity of the leader, and the coherence between what they say and how they live. The movement from fear to vision also redefines accountability. In fear-based systems, accountability is imposed from the outside. People act to avoid punishment or loss. In vision-driven systems, accountability is internalized. People act because they are committed to the vision, because they see themselves as integral to its fulfillment. This creates a level of ownership and responsibility that fear could never achieve. When individuals feel that the vision belongs to them as much as it belongs to the leader, they engage with it not out of obligation, but out of passion. Leading with vision requires courage, because it means letting go of the illusion of control. Fear provides the illusion of certainty. If you threaten people enough, they will act predictably. Vision requires stepping into uncertainty and trusting that people will rise to the occasion. It requires patience, because vision does not always yield immediate results. It requires resilience, because vision often challenges entrenched systems of fear and control. And above all, it requires authenticity, because people can sense when a vision is spoken from the intellect rather than lived from the heart. In times of change and disruption, fear often seems like the easier path for leaders. It promises quick compliance in moments of crisis, but in the long run, fear weakens systems, diminishes creativity, and erodes trust. Vision, though it may take longer to build, creates resilience, adaptability, and long-term growth. The future of leadership lies with those who choose vision even when fear feels tempting. Those who can hold a higher picture in the midst of uncertainty and invite others into that expanded reality. Vision-driven leadership is not just about setting goals or strategic plans. It is about awakening imagination. It is about showing people that they are not limited by their past or their current conditions, but that they can co-create a future beyond what they have ever known. A leader who leads with vision helps others see themselves differently, not as cogs in a machine, but as creators of a new reality. This shift in self-perception is the essence of transformation. The future of leadership cannot be understood without recognizing that all external leadership begins with self-leadership. The way a leader governs their inner world becomes the template for how they influence the outer world. Titles, strategies, and authority lose their effectiveness if the leader is unable to regulate their own thoughts, emotions, and energy. Self-leadership is not a secondary skill. It is the foundation of all other forms of leadership. In a rapidly evolving world where external conditions are uncertain and unpredictable, the only constant a leader can truly govern is their inner state. By mastering themselves, they gain the capacity to inspire, guide, and transform others. Self-leadership begins with awareness. Leaders must learn to observe the patterns of their own thinking and recognize the emotions that arise within them. Without this awareness, they become reactive, unconsciously projecting their stress, fears, and insecurities onto those they lead. When a leader lacks self-mastery, the organization reflects that fragmentation. But when leaders cultivate awareness of their internal state, they begin to take responsibility for the energy they bring into every interaction. They understand that their inner world is not separate from the collective atmosphere, but is directly shaping it. This awareness then leads to regulation. Self-leadership means learning to shift from states of fear, stress, and survival into states of calm, coherence, and creativity. Neuroscience shows that when individuals are in states of high stress, their brain and body operate in survival mode, narrowing focus and reducing the ability to think clearly or innovate. A leader in this state cannot inspire vision or collaboration because their energy is fragmented. But when leaders practice self-regulation through meditation, reflection, conscious breathing, or intention setting, they align their heart and mind into coherence. This coherence radiates outward and influences the entire system. creating an environment where others also feel more stable and creative. The future of leadership demands this kind of self-mastery because organizations are no longer functioning as rigid machines. They are evolving into dynamic ecosystems that thrive on creativity, adaptability, and trust. In such ecosystems, the leader's energy sets the tone. If the leader is reactive, fearful, or scattered, the ecosystem reflects that instability. But if the leader embodies presence, clarity, and coherence, the ecosystem reflects that stability and flourishes. Self-leadership is therefore not an act of isolation, but an act of service, because by mastering themselves, leaders create the conditions for others to access their own higher capacities. Self-leadership also involves breaking free from conditioned patterns. Many leaders have inherited models of authority that were rooted in control, fear, and competition. Without conscious effort, they replicate these patterns unconsciously, even if they desire to lead differently. Self-leadership requires a willingness to examine these inherited beliefs, question them, and reprogram them. It means no longer being a prisoner of the past, but becoming a creator of new possibilities. Leaders who master this process not only liberate themselves, but also model for others what it means to break free from limitation. They show that leadership is not about perpetuating old systems, but about evolving into new ways of being. Another essential aspect of self-leadership is alignment. A leader must align their thoughts, emotions, and actions with their vision. If there is misalignment, if they speak of trust but operate from fear, if they preach innovation but resist change, the inconsistency will be felt by those they lead. People are deeply sensitive to coherence, and they can sense when a leader's words and actions do not match. True influence comes when a leader embodies the values they speak about. Alignment creates authenticity, and authenticity generates trust. In this way, self-leadership is not only about mastering one's inner world, but about ensuring that the outer expression of leadership is consistent with the inner state of being. Self-leadership also expands into self-compassion and self-growth. Leaders who neglect themselves often burn out, becoming ineffective not because of lack of knowledge, but because of exhaustion and disconnection. To lead others into growth, leaders must continually grow themselves. To inspire others to embrace change, leaders must continually embrace change in their own lives. To encourage others to step into higher potential, leaders must commit to stepping into their own. This ongoing evolution becomes a signal to others that leadership is not about reaching a final state of authority, but about continually expanding awareness and capability. The relationship between self-leadership and collective leadership is inseparable. Every organization reflects the consciousness of its leadership. A leader who is fragmented internally creates fragmented systems externally. A leader who is coherent internally creates coherent systems externally. This is why self-leadership is not optional. It is the foundation upon which all else is built. Leaders who ignore their inner world may achieve short-term results, but the culture they create will be fragile. Leaders who prioritize self-mastery create cultures that are resilient, adaptable, and visionary. Self-leadership also requires courage. It demands the willingness to face one's own fears, limitations, and blind spots. It is often easier to focus on controlling others than to confront one's own internal chaos. But true leadership requires this inner confrontation. By doing the inner work, leaders gain the capacity to remain calm in uncertainty, to hold vision in the face of doubt, and to inspire others not by force but by example. The courage to master oneself becomes the most profound demonstration of leadership because it shows others that transformation is not just possible, it is embodied in the leader standing before them. The future of leadership is therefore rooted not in external structures of hierarchy or control, but in the internal mastery of those who lead. Self-leadership is the foundation because without it, vision collapses, collaboration falters, and energy fragments. With it, leaders become the kind of individuals who do not just manage organizations but transform them. They become catalysts for growth, coherence, and possibility. They show that leadership is not about controlling others, but about leading oneself so fully and authentically that others are naturally inspired to expand into their own higher potential. The future of leadership is not a continuation of the old models of hierarchy and control. It is a profound transformation of how we understand influence, power, and human potential. It is the shift from control to consciousness, where leadership becomes less about managing behavior and more about awakening awareness. It is the movement from authority to energy, where presence and coherence create more impact than titles or command. It is the recognition that collaboration is the true wealth of our time, that the genius of the collective always exceeds the limits of the individual. It is the courage to lead with vision rather than fear, expanding possibility rather than contracting into survival. And above all, it is the realization that every leader must first master themselves. For self, leadership is the foundation upon which all true leadership is built. This is the call of the future, to step into leadership not as controllers of others, but as creators of environments where awareness, energy, collaboration, vision, and self-mastery thrive. It is an invitation to embody a higher state of being so that leadership becomes less about what we demand and more about what we inspire. The future belongs to those who understand that leadership is not a position, but a presence, not an act of control, but a state of consciousness.